He's got the strength of a spider, but it's all in proportion to his size. Spiders are very, very strong, you know, so he's thousands of times stronger than you or me.
If you get me a picture of the Spider-Man, that I'd buy.
Who? By the way, Mr. Jameson, how many of these would you like?
I'll think about it. Get moving!
Yes, sir.
This one's an original.
You said he just happened to catch this Spider-Man in action.
That's another of life's little mysteries, huh? I've programmed them all for the final step.
This is the guy with the mind control, the one that's been making all these robberies and accidents happen.
Who is he?
Peter, aren't you coming down for dinner? Peter, where were you? You missed everything.
Part-time you take pictures of Spider-Man. That's your name then, right? Peter Parker?
It's me.
So you probably know the story. Geeky teenager Peter Parker is bitten by a radioactive spider. Before he knows it, he takes on its abilities and soon becomes Spider-Man. At first, Peter exploits his gift to rake in some easy cash, but then fate steps in and his Uncle Ben is murdered. Peter is overwhelmed with guilt when he discovers he could have easily stopped the murderer beforehand. He learns the lesson: with great power comes great responsibility, and from then on he uses his abilities for good. Spider-Man's story has become one of the most familiar superhero origins. Since debuting in the issue of Amazing Fantasy number 15 in 1962, Spider-Man would become one of the most beloved and famous comic book characters, and would become Marvel Comics' most recognized superheroes. Spider-Man quickly moved to the animated format. From 1967 to 1970, he starred in his first cartoon series, which produced one of the most memorable cartoon theme songs for any superhero.
Is he strong? Listen, bud. He's got radioactive blood. Can he swing from a thread? Take a look overhead. Hey there goes the Spider-Man.
Tune in next time when Spidey says...
In 1974, Spider-Man joined the cast of the popular children's show, The Electric Company. He never got to speak on the show. His dialogue was provided by word balloons. With Spider-Man's popularity not wavering, in 1977, CBS introduced a live-action television show of the character. The pilot movie recounts Spider-Man's origins with a basic outline. An innocent spider is poking his nose where it doesn't belong in a science lab, and gets exposed to some radioactivity. Peter gets bitten and suddenly discovers his new abilities. He soon has his unmistakable costume and starts swinging around town to fight crime. Remember when the 2001 film was coming out and fans cried foul about Spidey's organic web shooters? Well, this time around the web shooters are built solely by Peter with his scientific know-how. I'm all for staying true to the source material, but while rewatching this, I think I prefer the organic web shooters. I'm completely willing to suspend disbelief, but somehow watching a kid build these things is just a little too hard for me to accept. I know it's supposed to demonstrate Pete's intelligence and all that, and it's kind of crazy sounding since I can go along with him sticking to walls and everything else. But, I mean, what can I tell you? They might be a good setup for a cliffhanger every now and then. Spidey is falling, no big deal, he'll just shoot one of his webs. Oh crap, he's out of webbing. What will he do? I'm not sure if they took advantage of that scenario during the run of the show, since I haven't seen all the episodes, but him just making these things is too much of a stretch for me. There's one major absence in the pilot's telling of the story. The lesson of with great power comes great responsibility is never touched on. The catalyst for Peter to use his powers to fight evil because of his indifference at the time to stop the criminal, who eventually kills Uncle Ben, is nowhere to be found. I suppose I can understand how the filmmakers at the time wanted to drop that whole thing. I mean, maybe they thought a murder of a loved one was just too heavy a subject to present to the little kids who the show was aimed for. But still, losing that motivation of the character is somewhat disappointing. The show tries to replace Pete's incentive of wanting to solve the crimes with just him being a really helpful kind of guy and wanting to help the girl. But it's really not as powerful as the original story. Nicholas Hammond plays the sincere, innocent guy pretty well. He looks a little too old for the part and isn't as geeky as I envisioned Peter. But he's a regular, likable enough guy that he did start to grow on me while watching him. Lisa Eilbacher is effective as Judy, who Peter befriends. She looks really cute, and while rewatching this I was racking my head as to where I knew her from. Then I finally realized it's Jenny from Beverly Hills Cop. I wonder whatever happened to her. Everything else is pretty much here. We got Aunt May, who doesn't do too much. She mainly just checks on Peter to make sure he eats his meals. J. Jonah Jameson at the Daily Bugle is his cranky self. His eventual dislike of Spider-Man is mainly attributed to him just not liking pretty much everyone. Robbie Robertson is at the Bugle and seems to be the only guy Jameson is able to stand. Meanwhile, Peter plays out his role as Spider-Man's unofficial photographer. Also thrown in is a police detective, who is constantly on Peter's case and is always suspicious of him. The setting is supposed to be New York, but the show was shot in LA and it clearly shows. Despite a few location shots of New York, it never really sells the illusion the story is taking place on Peter's home turf. As for the story itself, this bad guy has this brainwashed cult and uses a mind control device to force people to rob banks and stuff. His big plan is to threaten the city for ransom, or else he'll unleash a wave of suicides. One of the victims is the father of, fortunately for us, Judy, the cute girl. Peter meets her and does anything to prevent any further mayhem in the city. At one point, Peter and Judy are victims of the mind control, and Peter almost willfully jumps off the Empire State Building. Nice location shooting for that. But luckily, the device is knocked loose. Peter awakens from the trance, and Spider-Man destroys the mind control device and takes down the bad guys.
Where you want to go to? Hey man, I don't want to mess with you.
Of course, there's that inevitable scene of the bewildered bystander looking at the costumed hero as if he's crazy. I think almost every superhero movie has it. It's almost like a requirement. The effects aren't that great. There's some really laughable blue screening to make Peter look like he's climbing walls. There are a few of the wall crawling shots that kind of sell the idea of a guy being able to actually climb buildings. There are a few techniques that look to be the best the filmmakers could accomplish at the time. As a friend commented to me, the stunts required to bring a believable Spider-Man to life was just too ambitious at the time, especially on a television budget. A fight between Spider-Man and 3 karate guys with sticks. I guess there's supposed to be some kind of not-so-subtle security team. Results in the biggest fight scene. The choreography really shows, and the few stunts Spidey does do, they don't look as amazing as they probably did to the kids who first watched it. His webbing doesn't look like it has any strength at all either. I think a can of silly string would be a more powerful weapon. The show really lacks some good supervillains for Spidey to go up against. You know what they say, the more powerful the villain a hero is facing makes him look that much better. So it would have been nice if Spidey got to face some of his popular ones. Maybe even make some of them recurring characters. I can imagine the horror the filmmakers might have faced if they considered throwing in the Green Goblin or Doc Ock in an episode, and their panic of how to make those guys work. I mean, they were having a tough enough time to make Spidey shoot a web. The show had a cast change when it was picked up as a series, and it produced 15 episodes that were dished out over the course of 2 years. Despite the production values, the shoddy effects, and creator Stan Lee dissing it, even after he was a consultant for it, I don't think it's a complete embarrassment to the character, so I can't really put it down. I mean, I can appreciate the attempt that was tried to bring a Spider-Man show to the air, even if the results were average at best. It's never been released on DVD, and I'm guessing it probably never will be. I mean, it's just an innocent portrayal of a Spidey adventure show for kids. Nothing more. Watching it now with the perspective of 30 years later and being used to films that have more complex effects and thrilling stories, it just looks like a very modest 70s show. I've heard from fans who grew up watching it they really enjoyed it at the time. Probably the ideal time to have appreciated it was in 1977, being 7, 8 years old sitting on the floor in front of the tube. Then you might have thought it was the greatest thing ever. Some shows I think are like that. Of course, as time passes and the audience gets older, they go back and rewatch it and it might not hold up as well as they remembered it. But still, it holds a place of nostalgic affection for them.
Peter, I would have put the soup on the table now.